You can accept it when you get.
I just got to use the bathroom, but I'll come back and I'll press okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we did last week.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, me too. Sounded like a good idea. About halfway through, I went, might be a good idea. William might be onto something.
Yeah. All right, cool.
So I
do we want to start then? Okay, I'll just, here we go. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I pressed okay.
Okay. Well, let's give it a 30 seconds or so. Okay, so welcome to Roadmap. I'm here with William Lowe. Tonight we're going to talk about something we just coined MPM for Magic Pill Mindset. This is a concept of expecting too much out of your recovery too quick. And William's going to start us off. Okay. I had something really good right before I went to the bathroom. Let's see if I can grab it back again. That's right. All right. Hi, I'm Preston. I'm back again with William Lowe, and we're going to do another roadmap. Tonight, the subject we're going to talk about is something, an acronym that we just coined before we started recording, and that's MPM, Magic Pill Mindset. This is something that you might want to be aware of in your stroke recovery, and it's certainly something that you don't want to have work against you. So William's going to start off with a couple of his thoughts on this, and then we'll talk about it for the rest of the evening. William?
Okay, thanks, Ralph. So I've talked to a lot of stroke survivors since I first started my journey after stroke. And if there's one thing I've learned talking to a lot of stroke survivors, exchanging notes as well as coaching some in their recovery after stroke, it's this idea of having a sort of magic pill mindset towards stroke recovery. And basically this is a mindset where where some stroke survivors believe that if they do an exercise and they're not seeing instant results the next day, that somehow that exercise doesn't work, or whatever they're doing doesn't work. And although I can definitely understand why some people might have this mindset, given the convenience of treatments we have now for headaches. For example, you can take a Tylenol to treat your headache, and you can take all sorts of magic pills and whatnot for your cold. I believe that having a magic pill mindset towards stroke recovery, in this case, I guess getting discouraged if you don't see things instantly, can actually be a little bit counterproductive, because sometimes in recovery after stroke, it takes a while for your brain to actually connect the dots together and for recovery to actually happen. And I think in order for recovery to happen, you've got to be able to pounce on it when it actually happens, to be able to turn whatever your brain gets back, however small it is, into tangible results which you're able to apply into your everyday life. And so I think having a magic pill mindset, it can actually sometimes sabotage you, in that it might stop you from being able to recognize what you've actually gotten back, because you're so focused on looking for a big change. But when in reality, stroke recovery comes in very small increments, and it's only when you take a 40,000-foot view after a month or 2 months after doing an exercise that you're able to actually do an accurate assessment of whether or not that exercise actually worked in your favor, and if you were able to see some improvements or progress in your recovery. So that's basically my take on having a magic pill mindset, and why I believe that sometimes it can get in the way of your recovery and being able to see progress, and actually being able to jump on recovery as it happens, and actually turn what your brain has gotten back into something a lot bigger, so that you can apply that to your everyday life and progress in your recovery after stroke. So I'm just wondering, Ralph, if you had any thoughts about this whole magic pill mindset, and what your experiences around it were.
Well, like you, I see a lot of this thinking out there, particularly from newbies, and particularly from people who haven't, ever trained for anything. I think athletes do better. I guess my thoughts would be on some things that you could do to kind of keep yourself on track and help yourself realize that it's not going to happen in a day or two or a week, so that you don't fall prey to the magic pill mindset. One of the things that I think the most important thing to do in any kind of home program is get going and stay going for a few days or a few weeks, because once you do, it's like going to the gym. You'll get energy off of it. You'll start to see little improvements, and you'll make it a routine. I think they say it takes 5 or 7 days to make something into a habit. So maybe you could, try and make your routine into a habit. You could realize things like they say it takes 8 or 10,000 reps to really learn something. You can't do anywhere near that amount of reps in a day. So if you're doing 100 and you divide it out, that's 100 days. So you got to get yourself thinking that it's just not going to happen overnight, that it's a marathon, that you're in for the long haul. And that would be a first step. I'm a big believer in success builds on success, so I always set small, achievable goals. One of the ways to assure that you make your goals is, if you're trying something that's too hard, try and break it down into the pieces. I'm a guy, and I had typical guy thinking after my stroke, which was, well, I have to do it. They give you these sheets with the exercises on them. And I was saying, I have to do it just like the sheet perfectly because they gave me that sheet. Well, sometimes that's not possible. And if you can't do it, you get defeated. And so I always thought it was cheating if I didn't do it exactly the way I was supposed to, perfect right out of the box. Well, it doesn't work that way. So over the course of my recovery, and then particularly in working with other people, I saw the light differently when it was somebody else. It's harder to have, sometimes it's harder to focus on ourselves and have realizations about ourselves. But I realized that if you break things down, then you're still learning the task. It's not cheating. But the other thing is, you can learn to do a part of it and then add the second part to it, and now you got it. If you keep trying to do it and you can't do it, you can end up discouraged. So those are a couple of things I've found in my recovery, in terms of like trying to get going and keep going with some momentum. Well, momentum by itself means, Newton's laws, a body in motion tends to stay in motion. So get yourself into motion and you'll have some momentum. So I think I've never thought of that word before, but I think that's a good concept for stroke recovery and getting a home program off the ground. Try and build some momentum, because that's what it's going to take to get to the other side. Some momentum, consistency, working at it and not giving up, paying attention, learning from everything, marking your progress, relishing in the small progress you see. So those are some of my thoughts from my recovery and how to avoid the pitfalls of potential MPM.
Yeah, that's right. And I just want to add on to everything which Ralph has said and just say that perfect, it doesn't exist. I think that perfect, the idea of having a perfect movement, that only really happens after you've practiced something, thousands and thousands of times. And I think in recovery after stroke, when you're first learning how to do something, or when you get back a movement, when you get back some sort of movement, whether this be a flick or an actual movement, it's not going to look the exact same as it was before your stroke straight out of the gate. It will start off a little bit ugly. Maybe it might start off with maybe a quarter of an inch of a movement, and maybe say if you're trying to open your fingers, that there's some tightness which is stopping you from going further than a quarter of an inch, but it's there and it's something you can build on. And I think that in recovery after stroke, like I mentioned before, it's really about noticing those small wins which you've got and being able to pounce on those small improvements or movements which your brain has gotten back. Because as I say to my paying clients and also other stroke survivors which I've coached, whenever you get something back in recovery after stroke, however small movement it is, even if you can only just feel it, this is really your brain telling you that this is your opportunity to really pounce on this movement, make it a lot bigger, and keep practicing it until it becomes a lot bigger and tangible so that you can actually see it. Because one thing which your brain doesn't have after stroke is as good good retention as it used to have before. So what this means is that if your brain has gotten back a movement after your stroke, it's more likely to forget that movement as quickly as it got it back, because unless you practice it and you tell your brain to really prioritize it, because otherwise that blueprint in your brain, it's going to shrink back down to what it was before. So I think that in recovery after stroke, like Ralph said, you've really got to be consistent with the way that you practice, and I think really trusting the process that things will get better, because once your brain gets back some sort of movement, it's really your job to police your brain and guide it into the right direction by telling it that this movement is really important. We have to prioritize this by practicing this as much as possible until we can apply it to life. And I really think that's a main goal of stroke recovery, is to take the exercises you've done in the clinic or down through insurance, practice them so much to the point where you feel competent, and once you're competent, being able to apply them to real life. Once you apply them to real life and you're doing them on such a consistent basis, then that blueprint in your brain will actually start to become a lot bigger as your brain starts to recognize and it starts to understand the importance of trying to remember how to do these movements, which it's gotten back until it just becomes natural in your brain, just does it automatically. It doesn't have to think as much about doing them as when it first got the movements back. So that's really what I have to add. And I just wanted to share. I just wanted to bring it back to you, Ralph, because I know you mentioned some things to me before we started this conversation about looking out for movement and I guess being observant about how you're making changes.
Well, I found that I was pretty serious about my recovery, and I think that it worked well for me. If whatever I was working on, I would be paying attention pretty closely to that. Last week we talked about, like walking, you got 4 or 5 things going on, and I'd try and think about my ankle and hip, even if I was working on my knee. But if I was working on my knee, I'd be paying really pretty strict attention to my knee, because, well, you really can't learn from it. And when you get the right motion, then you can kind of like see how that feels between your, in this case, leg and brain, and you can try and repeat it or duplicate it if you're paying attention. I found often that I'd be walking along and all of a sudden I'd get a shift in what I was working on. Suddenly I'd do a few that were better. So when I was paying attention, concentrating on pretty heavily all the time when I was in recovery, I could focus on that and try and repeat it. And I found that when I paid attention, I was able to focus on things and then repeat them. And I felt that was good because I'm a big believer in form, like you. And the more good ones you can do, the more you are likely to pattern your brain, build that blueprint we talk about, leave an impression. So I found concentrating and paying attention to even small movements. People have heard this before, but I got my hand going by with mental practice. And if I hadn't been staring at it, I wouldn't have seen that 1/16 of an inch move, because it was literally that small. It just was truly a flicker or a wiggle. And so I paid attention and I went, okay, wait, I did it again. So can I do it again? Okay, I can do it again. So I'm controlling that. I mean, I literally had this conversation, not out loud, of course, but going on in my brain with pretty much anything I was working on. I don't know, I guess I felt like, how else am I going to learn to be better if I don't pay attention to the way I'm doing and notice the improvements and try and latch onto them and hang on to them. You kind of alluded to that. Once you get some movement or something, pay attention to it, hang on to it, work it, try and take it for a ride so you don't forget about it by tomorrow. So that was my thinking, concentrating, paying a lot of attention. And I think that you're not likely to do that if you've got the magic pill mindset too much, where you're just expecting things to work and everything. In my experience, it doesn't work that way. The more work you put in terms of reps, the more concentrating you do on what you're doing, the more focused your approach. I think all these things add to up to a better recovery, as opposed to like thinking it's like something you can just do a few and get better, because that's the way medication works and everything else in our world that gives us instant gratification. There's no instant gratification in stroke recovery. You can have instants, plural of, and they're kind of like flickers of a moment. You can have instance where you have um, gratification from what you're doing, but it's a marathon. I mean, that's used a lot. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. 8,000 reps, 10,000 reps. Think weeks to really improve something, and you'll go into with a much longer game mindset. People who have the short game mindset get discouraged. If you can somehow get some momentum going and convince yourself that you're going to stick it out, then I think you'll do a lot better than somebody that's expecting instant gratification, fairly immediate results, because my experience, it just doesn't work that way. We've given examples of people that we worked with. Last week I gave an example of somebody, took us almost a year to get him to stand up after he'd been using a walker because he leaned over. So I don't want to be discouraging, because I think the harder you work and the more you pay attention, the more likely you are to make progress. But I think it's important to also realize that it's just, you're not going to see major improvement by next week. So those are some of my thoughts. You got anything else you want to add, William?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just want to add on to what you said about hanging on to those movements, because it really resonated with me, as it's something which I saw in some of my clients in the past. It's and thinking about what you said, I realized that it's really about finding the winning formula which works for you and your recovery. I mean, in your case, Ralph, it sounds like it was being able to see that quarter of an inch of movement in your fingers, and then really telling yourself, what if I could make it happen a lot more, and how can I keep reinforcing that success in my brain, whether this be with your hand or your walking, and I guess replicate that success, replicate it, what you did, which led to a better quality movement or a successful movement, and then I guess persisting in the way that you followed those steps and sequences, which led to success over time, until you were able to do it automatically without thinking. So I think that's really the most important thing in recovery after stroke, is that whenever you see those small movements, really hold on to them, because I think that these are sort of like sparks going off in your brain, letting you know that you're doing something right, and that this is an opportunity for you to catch the train to recovery. And if you don't catch it, there won't be a next train. You don't know when the next train is going to come, because, like I mentioned, your brain is going to forget very quickly what it gets back, unless you prioritize it and you really reinforce your brain through repetitions that this movement which you've gotten back is important, so that eventually you can turn it into something tangible through practice and actually apply it to day-to-day life, like you did before you had your stroke. And I think if you can adopt this attitude where you're looking out for recovery and you're working on it as it happens, that this can really equip you well for your recovery journey after stroke, because it will give you a sort of a compass of where to go in your recovery after stroke, and whether or not you're heading in the right direction. Obviously, if you're in a situation where you're not seeing any improvements at all, then that's an indication that something needs to change, in order for you to get a little bit more of those small moments or sparks from your brain that you're doing something right. But obviously, if you're getting those sparks all the time, then that means that you're building up that momentum, and that you've got to keep doing what you're doing, to build on whatever you've gotten back, to make that movement tangible, such that you're able to progress in your recovery after stroke towards your recovery goals. So that's really all I have to add. I'm just curious, Ralph, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Well, I guess was saying, I use the example with my hand and small amount of movement, but it was true with everything, while you were talking, I was sitting here thinking, like I remember when I first did a really pretty good heel strike and follow through and roll off the toe. And I went, because I was paying attention, I went, wow, that was pretty good. What do I do there? How do I do that again? And I would actually, maybe stop thinking about swinging my arm or something else and really focus on that. And I would like immediately, try and do that nice heel strike roll through again. And oftentimes, in some cases, I'd get a few of them, and then I wouldn't let go of it. If it went away, I'd try and find it again. It's almost kind of like finding it, because it's a balance between not thinking about it and thinking about what you were doing. If you apply too much cognitive, you can get something called cognitive interference, where you're overthinking. I'm prone to that. So, if I got something good during, let's say I'm, walking for 20 minutes in the driveway, and I did some good, nice heel strike and roll throughs, the whole rest of the time I'd be saying, okay, I'd be thinking about how to do that again and trying to replicate it. And oftentimes it happened, and then I got in some of that good patterning, and I didn't know anything about neuroplasticity. I didn't know anything about flickers of movement. I didn't know anything about anything except I paid attention, and I found that if I was able to replicate something one day, that I often could pick it, not necessarily right back up, but I could be thinking about it, concentrating on it, and then all of a sudden get the good heel strike and roll throughs again. So then, okay, I found it again today. So it's not gone, and how am I doing that? How am I doing that? You got to do that day after day for a while until it becomes more natural. So for me, I can't put enough importance on all the paying attention to detail and concentrating on all the things. And I did a lot of it visually. I would watch myself, and I would try and figure out when it felt good and watch what that looked like, and then try and replicate that and see if it felt good again. So it's kind of a like back and forth. So that's what I did. Hopefully, maybe you can take some of the things that we've talked about today and apply them to your own stroke recovery. William, do you have anything else before I sign us off?
Not really. I think it's just really about finding the winning formula which works for your recovery. So, I mean, for Ralph, obviously it was more visual, looking out for what he did, which led to success, and just reinforcing that. So much so that his brain eventually got the hang of it, and it was able to do it automatically. Sure, I mean, it might have started off a little bit messy, but then as he practiced it, the movement got more refined. And I'm assuming in your case, Ralph, eventually led to a point where it felt natural and your brain didn't really have to think about it.
Pretty close. Pretty close. Yeah. So I can't say enough about concentrating and paying attention, at least in my case. So I guess we'll see everybody back here on the next roadmap. And until then, good luck and with your recovery. And it also might help to try and see if you can adapt a long game attitude and pay attention to the things that you're doing, break them down, see if some of the things that we've talked about today can't be of benefit to you in your recovery, because I think they can. So we'll see everybody next time.
Oh, that wasn't half bad.
No, well, it was pretty good.
Yeah.